All right, today we're going to dive into something that feels so core to who we are, our memory. We all walk around thinking our memory is this perfect, high-definition recording of our lives. But what if I told you the truth is actually way stranger, and honestly, a lot more interesting than that? No, really, think about that for a second. What if those crystal clear memories you'd swear on were distorted, or maybe even completely made up? Now, this isn't science fiction. It's a very, very real part of how our brains are wired.
To really get what I'm talking about, let's start with a real-life experiment. So, picture this. You're just walking along, someone stops you and asks for directions. A totally normal, everyday kind of thing.
So while you're in the middle of talking, two guys carrying a big wooden door or a panel walk right between you and the person you're helping. It's a quick interruption just for a moment.
The panel moves on and you go right back to giving directions. But, and here's the crazy part, the person you are now talking to is a totally different person. We're talking different height, different hair, different clothes, even a different voice. So, here's the big question. Would you notice? Now be honest. You're probably thinking, of course I would. No way I'd miss that. It seems completely impossible to miss something that obvious, right?
Well, the reality is pretty mind-blowing. In the actual study, about half of the people didn't notice the switch at all. They just kept on giving directions. This is a real thing called change blindness, and it tells us something huge. Our brain isn't recording the world like a video camera. We're actually paying attention to a lot less than we think, and that has massive implications for our memory.
So if what we see is already that selective, what does that say about what we remember? Well, it all starts with understanding that your brain basically has two different systems for handling information.
The easiest way to think about this is like a computer. You've got your working memory, that's kind of like the desktop or the RAM. It's what you are consciously aware of right this second. It's super fast, but it's also tiny. Then you've got your long-term memory. That's the computer's massive hard drive. It can store a seemingly infinite amount of stuff. All the languages you know, every face you recognize, every fact you've ever learned.
So just how limited is that working memory, that mental desktop? Well, a psychologist named George Miller came up with the famous number, about 7, plus or minus 2. Yep, for most of us, that's it. We can only hold about 5 to 9 new, random bits of information in our heads at one time.
So how on earth do we function if our conscious mind is so limited? Well, our brains have this amazing little hack. It's called chunking. A chunk is just a single unit of meaning, something that your brain can treat as one single item instead of a bunch of separate pieces.
Let me show you exactly how this works. If you don't speak French, these letters, L-A-M-A-S-O-N, that's 8 separate chunks. It's already pushing the limits of your working memory. But if you do speak French, you don't see 8 letters. You see la maison, which means the house. And just like that, those 8 chunks become 1, maybe 2. See? By finding meaning and organizing information, you can basically superpower your memory.
And this right here, this idea of chunking, it busts one of the biggest myths about learning. We've all been taught that if you want to remember something, you just have to repeat it over and over and over again. But it turns out that is one of the worst ways to actually get something to stick.
Yeah, that whole repeat it 100 times thing, it's called maintenance rehearsal. It's great for keeping a phone number in your head just long enough to dial it. But the second you get distracted, poof, it's gone. It almost never makes that crucial leap from your mental desktop to the long-term hard drive.
So what really matters, and you can see it right here in this classic study, isn't how many times you see something, it's how deeply you think about it. People who were asked shallow questions, like was the word in capital letters, barely remembered anything. People who thought about how the word sounded did a little better. But the group who had to think about the word's meaning, their recall was just off the charts.
Okay, I want you to feel this for yourself. I'm going to read a short passage, and I just want you to try and remember it. Ready? A newspaper is better than a magazine. A seashore is a better place than the street. At first, it is better to run than to walk. You may have to try several times. It takes some skill, but it's easy to learn.
Yeah, impossible, right? It's just a jumble of disconnected sentences. Your brain has absolutely nothing to grab onto. You're trying to memorize a dozen random chunks, and it's just not going to happen.
But what if I gave you just one tiny piece of context? 2 words, flying a kite. Now listen again. A newspaper is better than a magazine. Yeah, for making a tale. A seashore is a better place than the street. Of course, wide open space. At first, it is better to run than to walk, to get the kite up in the air. All of a sudden, it just clicks. It makes sense.
And because it makes sense, it's almost impossible to forget.
Okay, so we get it. Understanding is the key. But this is where the story takes a turn. And honestly, it gets a little spooky. Because our memories aren't just files we pull out of a cabinet. They're things we rebuild from scratch every single time. And that rebuilding process, well, it can be messed with. Let me tell you about this experiment. It's unsettling. It's called the Sam Stone experiment. Researchers told a bunch of preschoolers about a guy named Sam Stone who was really clumsy. Then, Sam Stone came to visit the classroom, but he was super careful. He walked around, didn't touch a thing, and left. Weeks later, interviewers started asking the kids leading questions like, hey, do you remember when Sam Stone ripped that book? And guess what? A huge number of the kids created these incredibly detailed, vivid, completely false memories of Sam Stone going on a destructive rampage. And here's the thing, they weren't lying. They genuinely believed it happened. And don't think for a second this is just a thing with kids. The brilliant researcher Elizabeth Loft has proved this with adults over and over. In one study, she showed people a video of a car accident. She asked half of them, how fast were the cars going when they hit each other? She asked the other half, how fast were the cars going when they smashed into each other? The smashed group gave much higher speed estimates. But even crazier, a week later, they were far more likely to falsely remember seeing broken glass at the scene, which wasn't there. Just changing one single word literally changed their memory of what they saw.
And this brings us to what might be the single most important, and maybe the hardest, lesson in all of this. That powerful, gut-level feeling of certainty that a memory is real, it means nothing. It is absolutely no guarantee of its accuracy. Your confidence in a memory and the accuracy of that memory are two totally different things.
So, after all that, where does this leave us? What are the big things to remember about, well, remembering? Let's boil it all down to 3 essential truths.
Okay, 3 big truths. Number 1, memory isn't just one thing. You've got that tiny working memory and that giant long-term memory, and they play by different rules. Number 2, the real secret to remembering isn't just mindless repetition, it's deep understanding. You have to organize things and make them meaningful. And number 3, and this is the big one, you can't always trust your own memory. It's not a recording, it's a reconstruction.
Which leaves us with one last, kind of profound question to chew on. If your memory isn't a perfect record of what really happened, but it's actually a story that your brain retells and edits every single time you remember it, then who or what is really the author of your past?